Our first panelist is Dr. Mohsen Kadivar, who is the professor of Islamic Studies at Duke University. He has earned the certificate of Ijtihad from Qom, as well as his PhD. And he is a prolific author. He's published many works in various languages, in a range of topics also, including philosophy, theology, ethics, and many other topics. And the title of his presentation is Overcoming Obstacles to Legal Reform in Contemporary Muslim Societies. Please welcome Dr. Mohsen Kadivar.
Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So I should thank CIRF and also Bayan for inviting me to this wonderful event. I want my presentation with a sad story. In 1998 or 9, I read this question. If you have some problem in your country because of speech, because of religious freedom, which city or which country you will go? And he mentioned several cities: Mecca, Medina, Cairo, Damascus, or Washington, London, Paris, and so on. And the person who wrote this was a Muslim, but he did not practice Islam, and he called himself atheist. And I read this sentence when I was in jail because of a speech made in the name of terror is forbidden in Islam. It means terror is haram in Islam. And when I was released, now I'm in US. And it means that we cannot find any cities of Muslim majority that we are safe on this issue, religious freedom. You can go to yourself, ask, do we have such a city in this world or not? Also, I myself wrote a lot about religious freedom in Islam. But we have a problem on this issue. And the problem is also we can give a very beautiful, nice, wonderful interpretation of our scripture, of our tradition of our prophet on this issue, but in practice, there is something else. And also, not in practice, but also what we call it in Sharia or Fiqh, in different names, we have a lot of difficulties with the understanding of the jurist, with muhaddisun, with mufassirun, with Quran exegesis, with those who compile hadith, and also Muslim theologians and the others. So my question is, what is the obstacle of this issue among the Muslims? And I heard many good points today. Some of them are so close to my presentation, I do not want to mention them again, but I want to make a different point. And this point is, the obstacle to legal reform is old-fashioned or traditional ijtihad among the Muslims. It's not the only element, but it's a very important element that we should think about it. The style of ijtihad was not changed for several centuries among the Muslims. You know, ijtihad means independent reasoning. So it's the first cause of dynamism among the Muslims. It's the best issue. If you want to make some improvement in Islamic thought, I think the dynamism is ijtihad. But this dynamism did not work for several recent centuries. What happened to it? It means that if we go and read our history of Sharia, history of Fiqh, history of Kalam, the history of all these Islamic teachings. They were okay until 19th century. The Muslims, or the majority of the Muslims, did not have a lot of problem in implementation of Sharia personally or collectively. But in the age of modernity, there are a lot of new problems that the Muslim jurists could not respond to these new questions. And the crisis, I think, was started. We have a lot of different answers to these major questions. What should we do? There is a consistency. There is inconsistency between this interpretation of Islam, I mean historical Islam or traditional Islam, and this situation that we live in it, and we call it modernity. I do not want to say we should westernize our religion. No, it's completely far from my claim. But we should understand modernity. And modernity is not equal to westernization. Maybe we should find our style of modernization of our thought. By modernization, I mean some kind of revisiting or revision of Islamic thought. How? My method in this paper is ijtihad in mabani and usul, or ijtihad in foundations and principles. We have two kinds of ijtihad. In this short time, I try to explain the key points of it. What we have for 14 centuries, we can call it traditional ijtihad or conservative ijtihad. What we have, and we can find the fruit of it. It's okay. For its time, it's fine. But we cannot follow it in the modern time. The ijtihad of our jurists, our muftis, our ulama is so close to ijtihad of, for example, al-Ghazali among the Sunnis or Shaykh al-Mufid among the Shiites. They were great scholars for their time, for their age. But we need for 21st century or for 15th century of Hijrah, we need al-Ghazali of this century, Shaykh al-Mufid of this century. We cannot repeat al-Ghazali for this time. We cannot repeat Shaykh al-Mufid for the second time in this century. It's the problem. And all of these issues that we hear today, it's because of a very narrow, weak understanding of our teachings in religion according to this point that I made. It's some kind of misunderstanding. So the solution or overcoming to the obstacle is a structural ijtihad. I mentioned 2 points in it, foundational and principal. By foundation, I mean in Arabic, in al-mabani, and by principles, I mean usul. It means usul al-fiqh. So usul al-fiqh is a methodology of jurisprudence. This methodology should be revised. Also, it's so strong. It's a very important science among Islamic sciences, but we cannot follow it as it was. So the competitor to usul al-fiqh or to principles of the jurisprudence in the modern time is hermeneutics or linguistic philosophy. A jurist who does not know modern linguistic philosophy or hermeneutics, how can he may say something in the name of a scripture or in the name of tradition of prophet? And unfortunately, most of our jurists do not know anything about these two issues. It's nothing about modernization. It's something that we have a new science about understanding a text. The Quran is a text. Tradition of Prophet is a text. How you want to understand it. We have a science of understanding. This traditional science does not work. It means there is no room for the agency of the reader, of the jurist. And what is the background of this jurist? I will let you know about the background of the jurist and its role in understanding the text in the name of foundation. So the first thing that we should do is our jurists should learn about these two parallel to Mabahisul Alfaz, verbal sections of Usul al-Fiqh in the name of hermeneutics, the role. So when we want to read to understand the text, the first role belongs to the writer. The second role belongs to the text. The third role belongs to the reader. And the third role was ignored. They thought that anyone that read this text should understand the same as the others. So pluralism starts exactly from this point. Acknowledge of the role of reader in this point. Second, in also Usul al-Fiqh, methodology of the fiqh, is the role of context. We do not read a text in vacuum. We cannot look at a verse of the Quran and try to understand it. What are these vocabularies of this verse mean? What does that hadith in the name of Asbab al-Nuzul said about this? And after that, we try to give our interpretation of that verse. Or if we have a hadith, only look at the chain of transmitters. After that, we try to interpret it. No, it's not enough. What's the context? And I mean by context, two contexts. Context one is the context of the time of revelation, of the time of Prophet himself. If you do not know the context on that time, you may not understand, and sometimes you may understand in opposition to the content. I have a lot of experience. When I understood the context, I saw that, I misunderstood this. It was completely different issue. The second context that also is the point of ignorance, maybe almost all of our jurists, is modern context. It's not enough to know only the context in behind this verse or that hadith. The context that you live as a reader, as a Muslim in this time. If you want to say something about riba, usually, if you do not know modern economics, how can you say what is riba? What is interest? What's the difference between this and that? It's not something you can learn in the time of Prophet or in the time of companion. In each of these issues, you should know the subject in the modern time too. Not only the subject in the time of revelation. So, I mentioned only 2 points in here. And the third thing also, it could be all of the religious texts have some history. If you do not familiar with the methodology of history, historical text, if you want to learn a text that is historical, what is the methodology of it? When you want to evaluate a hadith, it's not enough to evaluate only the chain of transmitters. You should know the methodology of history text, historical text. Which of our jurists know these issues? Because of it, they made a lot of big mistakes in understanding hadith. Also, this hadith is sound in its transmitters, but the content is completely different according to these two contexts and the historicity of the text. These are the points that we need to know according to the modern understanding of any text, including the scriptures, and what we have in the name of hadith. But about foundation, what do I mean by foundation? foundations. I told you mabani. What does mabani mean? You see, we have philosophical, we have theological, we have ontological, we have sociological, we have psychological foundation. One example, who is human being? Anthropology. So what is the anthropology of Al-Ghazali? Anthropology of Ibn Taymiyyah, As-Sayyid al-Murtaza, and all of these other jurists that we respect them, Rizwanullah alayhim, peace be upon all of them, that what is their anthropology? When they reach the case of gender, how do understand human being as a male or as a female? Is it acceptable for them that these ordinances, religious rules, are for human being as human being, or human being as a male, as a Muslim male, as a Muslim free male? Big difference. It's not something that was written in the text. It's behind the text. It's between two lines of the scripture, between two lines of the hadith. You should not try to find it in the verses of the Quran or in the hadith of Prophet Muhammad. It's something beyond it. So, what is the anthropology of these persons? And another thing, for example, when we want to talk about these issues, who is God? I said, who is human being? The other major question, who is God? Arbitrary ruler? Or this God ought to be just? What is the foundation of philosophy of ethics, philosophy of law? We understand the text, the same verse, according to these two approaches differently, completely different. Or the other thing, what is prophecy? What is the major mission of our prophet? What is the expectation of Sharia? What is the expectation of prophecy? Did he come to give us some rules, some law? Is his book of law? Did Quran introduce itself as a book of law? In which verse? It's book of light, book of hidayah, book of guidance. It's the source of norms. It's the source for ethical values for the Muslims. What is Sharia after understanding this foundation? What is Sharia? Sharia is a set of law. Is Sharia law-oriented? Or is Sharia ethical, virtues-oriented? Is the style of Islamic Sharia like the Jewish halakha? Was it the influence of Judaism on Islam? Two shifts happened in the history of Sharia. The first shift happened in the beginning after Prophet, in the time of companions, of their followers, the Sahaba wa Tabi'un, and it's shifting from Sharia as a ethical values to Sharia as a law-oriented set. This is a big difference between these two. When you expect this text as a book of law, when there is something absolute, al-mutlaq, after that you can say, yes, it should say this or that. But behind this, if there is no this expectation, you cannot say the same thing. So, the second shift happened recently, and it's about Sharia as a state law. Sharia as a state law now happened in 4 countries. All of these issues that we learned today from our friends is about Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Sudan, and Iran. 3 Sunni Muslims, 1 Shiite. And all of them have the same problems. This problem is They made Sharia as a state law. Sharia was not a state law. Sharia was not law. Sharia is something permanent. Law cannot be permanent. Values, virtues could be permanent, but law cannot be permanent. If you want to have a permanent Sharia, you should interpret Sharia as something like ethical values. It's very close to higher objectives, maqasid al-Sharia. But you know, maqasid al-Sharia works in the look of the text. But I'm talking about something else. It's different from maqasid al-Sharia. So I have a lot of points. I think it's the end of my time. Thank you.